Aloha, welcome back to the Debrief from Hawaii News Now. In today's episode, we are continuing our conversation on housing. In the past episode, we delved into the impact short-term vacation rentals have on Hawaii's housing crisis. Now we are opening up the discussion to issues on housing in general. Here's a continuation of our interview with Justin Tyndall from the University of Hawaii Economic Research Organization. I kind of wanted to talk to you broadly about housing in Hawaii. I know you're the lead author of UHERO's Housing Fact Book that came out last summer, and wanted to go through some of the data with you. You know, it's no secret it's more expensive to buy a home now than it was back in 2000. But I was reading in your findings that it's actually worse than we thought. Can you walk us through why that is?
Right. So, in addition to reporting all this data on median prices, right, we also had this, what we call the UHERO Repeat Sales Index, right? So because we had this wealth of data of really every housing transaction for the last 20 years, what we're able to do is look at the same houses that sell multiple times over this study period, right? So this paints a slightly different picture, right? So from year to year, different portions of the market might heat up or cool down. So the median price, might change. But maybe if we're selling lots of luxury properties in a given year, it's not that the average house is getting more expensive, it's just we're transacting nicer houses, right? So what this methodology let us do is pick a set of houses that have sold many times over this period and look at individual houses and how much they sold. And we found that actually the price appreciation is even more. So, there were particular neighborhoods where a house might have sold for $100,000, 20 years ago, and now it's selling for $800,000, right? There were neighborhoods where the price appreciation was, 700%, right? So, this is painted even a more bleak picture of the run-up in home prices, right? Both statewide and, really concentrated in a few neighborhoods that have seen just, incredible price appreciation in recent years.
For me, I've just been looking at current listings, just curious to see what's out there, as someone young, grew up in Hawaii and wants to live here one day. Just looking at the housing prices, it really hurts when you hear stories of, my parents were able to buy a house, around my age, maybe a little older, but it seemed way more affordable back then than it is now. I just wanted to throw out, for example, in like Pearl City, Aiea areas, those can go upward to like $1 million to like 900,000. And most of these aren't brand new homes. They're maybe a little spruced up in some areas, but kind of just like the same skeleton. What are these people really buying if they were to buy that house? Are they buying the location? Is that why the prices are going up? Like, why is the price so expensive?
Yeah, so I think, one way at UHERO we've been trying to look at the housing market is just as one, related market, right? In this concept of like a housing ladder, right? So we don't really build much housing anywhere, right? And so the people who, want to live here are competing on a very scarce set of housing, right? So, the people bidding up, housing in Pearl City, maybe they don't even want to live in Pearl City, but like compared to some other neighborhoods, that's, a relatively more affordable option for some people, right? So, even if we're thinking of just like condominium market in like central downtown Oahu, for example, right? Like there's a lot of people who would, happily live in a condominium, but that's not available. So they may, move to Pearl City or something, right? So I think we need to think of it as just, we just don't simply have enough units in the state, right, to feed the demand for housing, right? So this is going to push up prices in all parts of the market, right? Location-wise, condo versus single-family home, right? They're all going to become more expensive, and the person who's going to get the housing is the person with the most money, right? So, we worry about if we build new housing, this could, go to sort of out-of-state buyers, something like this, right? We could target that issue directly. But, the solution can't be just not build any housing at all, right? Because the people who are going to be most affected are the people who are at least able to afford housing, and they're just simply going to have to leave the state because the housing's not available because, it's been bid up in all parts of the market in the state.
I was hoping to just go into the numbers a little bit more. If a person were to buy a median single-family home today, roughly how much would they have to be making in salaries to afford a down payment and monthly mortgage?
Right. So in this fact book, we have a little analysis on the level of affordability for buying a house in the state, right? So, the affordability has really plummeted recently, in particular because of the rise in interest rates, right? So mortgages have become, incredibly unaffordable because of high interest rates. And, prices have dipped a tiny bit over the last year, but have really been stable, right? So affordability has gotten much worse for new home buyers, right? So we find that, to afford the median house, the single family home in the state, you need to earn about 180% of the median income, right? And even for the median condo in the state, you need to earn above median income, right? So half the state can't even afford, down payment and mortgage payments on an individual condo. So this paints a pretty bleak picture in affordability. The majority of households can't afford any housing in the state under current interest rates and prices.
Right. And, 180% of the median income, what is that number in dollars?
Right. So that would be, about $150,000, $160,000, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. Just to, buy like a median single family home. Just thinking about 150, 160, like, I don't even know if I'd be making that in the next couple of years.
Right. And I mean, the median house in the state is about 45 years old, right? So we're not thinking of the median new house, right? We're thinking of a 45-year-old house that's going to have maintenance issues, et cetera, which we don't even factor in those costs, right? So, it's, even for that type of house, it's extremely unaffordable, right?
Yeah, and how, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but how UHERO defines affordability, it's being able to 30% of your income to be able to afford housing, is that correct?
Yeah, so in some of the analysis, we look at 50%, but yeah, the sort of nationally adopted rule, right, is 30%, right? Most people in the state spend a lot more than that on housing, right? But that's how affordability is typically defined, yeah.
Yeah, and 30%, why exactly is it 30%? Or why is that the number that you guys try to shoot for when it comes to affordability?
So, there were sort of national conversations around this. The federal agencies use this as a threshold for affordability. So I think the answer is we're trying to be consistent with what other people do to measure affordability. Yeah, it's not necessarily a magic number. I think it's supposed to, capture a level of reasonable housing expenditure where you could still enjoy like a reasonable quality of life with, all of the other expenses of life. Yeah.
And even more staggering is how Hawaii compares to, the U.S. in general. I wanted to bring up this graph, which was put out by the Chamber of Commerce Hawaii in their 2030 economic blueprint. The gap between the U.S. median housing price and Hawaii's has widened significantly over the last 20 years. What are some of the factors that led to this disproportion?
Right. So, I think what we've tried to hammer on in a bunch of UHERO reports is just the inability to build housing in the state, right? So obviously we have strong demand for housing, but, when we look at analysis of the drivers of home prices, right, we find that supply constraints are really correlated with the places where prices have gone up the most. So just the fact that we, don't build housing and we have large demand, that demand just shows up in higher and higher prices, right? So, we point to issues like permitting and really strict zoning and environmental regulation laws, right, that prevent new housing from being constructed in the state, right? Some of these laws are good, right? So we want to have a level of environmental protection and consideration when we're building new houses. Some of these laws are probably not very good, or just the fact that, building permits can take years to materialize, right? I don't think because someone's thinking really carefully about your permit, it's more an issue of understaffing in permitting offices and just sort of bloated, bureaucratic processes that go into these type of permits. So although some of these, regulations are pretty well-meaning, they add up to, just making it impossible to build housing in most places, in most cases. So we just don't build housing, and this is, I think, a pretty simple explanation for why prices have gone up so much.
Yeah, and I also wanted to point out another graph that they put out that nearly 40% of households in Hawaii are burdened by the cost of housing. What does this look like, being burdened by the cost of housing? Is that just, trying to make ends meet with all the other, costs of living here, and then on top of that, paying the really high prices, whether it be rent or like a mortgage?
Right. I mean, I think the effects are very visible, right? And this is no surprise that this has become like the number one political issue, right? And an important issue is housing, right? So, we see it every day in homelessness, right? So on the one end of the spectrum, there's just a large portion of people in the state who can't afford any housing at all, right? if we look across states, the big predictor of homelessness is home prices, right? So there's a lot of, individual reasons that cause someone to become homeless, but, in the data, it's crystal clear that it's really just home prices, right? So if we had cheaper housing, many of those people would be housed, right? And I think we see it a lot in people leaving the state, right? So we have net out-migration from the state every year. I think 11,000 people left the state for other states last year, more than came the other direction, right? And the big reason, I think, is cost of living and particularly home prices, right? And then people who do stay, we see them paying extreme prices for homes that are, not as high quality as you would get for that price other places, right? So, if we look at these typical, $1.5 million homes and compare $1 and $1.5 million homes in other markets, right? There's just a staggering difference in the quality there, right? So, people are really underhoused and have, worse quality housing than they would in a world where we built more housing.
Yeah, and going back to UHERO, doing all this research on housing, what would you say are the key takeaways, and what can we or the government do to make Hawaii more affordable for locals and Native Hawaiians?
Right. So, I think in a lot of these conversations, we hear people saying, there's no silver bullet for housing. I think there is, and it's to build more housing, right? So obviously that's easier said than done, right? And how we get there is going to be a challenge. But the connection between policies that make it illegal to build multifamily housings in most places, that make it take a long time to build any housing, right? This directly leads to less supply and into higher prices, right? So I think if we want to seriously address the affordability crisis, the housing crisis, we need to find ways to build more housing. So there's some political will, it seems, to do that, but we are still waiting on the biggest results, right? We still need to see sort of faster movement on housing production. The stakes are pretty high for the viability of our state and our residents to be able to stay and build a life here.
Yes, thank you so much, Justin, for going into all of this. I know there's a lot, and there's definitely more that research that you guys done. For our viewers who are interested in learning more about all the research that you guys done on housing, where can they go to find more information?
Yeah, so we have all of our housing reports and a lot of other reports on our website at UHERO. So that's the best place to find out about all our research.
Amazing. And is there anything else that you wanted to add? I know we touched on a lot, but was there anything else that you wanted to say when it comes to housing in Hawaii?
No. So, we're still going to be doing a lot of work on housing. So we're working right now on the updated version of this fact book. So this is going to be an annual report, right? So we're sort of collecting and updating data right now, trying to tell some new stories with that data. So, people can be on the lookout for some new UHERO housing reports that will be coming out soon.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me in on this conversation, Justin. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you so much to all our viewers who listened in too.
Thanks a lot.
You can watch and listen to more of the Debrief at hawaiinewsnow.com or wherever you get your podcasts. This is your host, Emily Cristobal, and mahalo for listening.